As I was preparing for this podcast, honestly, I was not aware of this concept of conscious capitalism. But as I read more and more, this is what hospitals do each and every day.
Hello, I'm Soyini Koch, and I want us to take a journey together. There's a movement in business. Some call it stakeholder capitalism, others call it purpose-led business, others profits through purpose, going beyond profits, or we like to call it conscious capitalism. Regardless of what you like to call it, there are business leaders all around the world who are committing to and doing their very best to use their power for good and not for evil. So I want you to join me in learning how to do this conscious capitalism thing better and better, one conversation at a time. Welcome to Capitalism Done Right, brought to you by CEO Exclusive and Conscious Capitalism Atlanta. In this episode, I talk with two leaders from the hospital industry here in Georgia, and you can imagine what they've been through over the past couple of years. So I want you to listen carefully for how they used and invoked having a higher purpose to guide them through the pandemic. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Capitalism Done Right. I am very, very delighted to have on our show today Earl Rogers, the president and CEO of the Georgia Hospital Association, and Sarah Morrison, the CEO of the Shepherd Center, wonderful hospital that's right on Peachtree Street in the city of Atlanta. So I would love to start our conversation, Earl, with you sharing your thoughts and perspective on the state of hospitals in Georgia after the pandemic and through all of these very turbulent times that we've had over the past few years. From your standpoint, what's happening? What do you see?
Well, thank you, Soyini. I appreciate the opportunity to join you and Sarah Morrison today. How are Georgia's hospitals doing after COVID? Well, since the COVID low point, hospitals are continuing to do what they did before COVID and then on during the pandemic. Hospital doctors, nurses, caregivers, treating illnesses and injuries to the best of their ability to advance their mission, which is to improve the health of individuals and their communities. And they do this by following the essence of what we're talking about here today, which you have referred to as conscious capitalism. You know, Chick-fil-A comes to mind when I think of conscious capitalism. Chick-fil-A clearly follows a culture of, first, take care of the customer, exceed expectations with quality food, quality facilities, quality service with quality people, even if it costs more to do it. You do these things, do them well, and the financial reward will follow. And I think that's certainly happened in the case of Chick-fil-A, a company that is only open 6 days out of every 7. Ever since hospitals came into being, they have been taking part of this concept in the largest part of their culture. They take care of patients first. They do it well. They exceed expectations with knowledgeable and quality staff, and the customers, the patients will come. Since the pandemic slowed, hospitals are facing challenges now like never before. Georgia's hospitals provided almost $3 billion in uncompensated care, while government programs such as Medicaid and Medicare continue to pay hospitals and healthcare providers at a much lower rates than it actually costs to provide the care. Now, it's important to make clear the government pays lower than actual costs, not charges. I don't know of any vendor, supplier, or contractor that provides goods and services to the government that gets paid less than what it costs to deliver, except hospitals and other Medicaid providers. Add that to the fact that hospitals and other healthcare providers are now facing a severe workforce shortage. Recent official data shows that Georgia currently has a shortage of almost 14,000 nurses, but because multiple open positions that are identical are posted only once on hospital websites and at the state labor department, I'm told that number is easily twice that at 28,000. And a jobs report article appearing on the front page of the June 17th Atlanta newspaper suggests thousands more. The nursing schools just can't graduate them fast enough. There's not enough nursing schools. The same can be said of physicians. significant shortage, not enough in the education pipeline, simply not enough capacity. Despite this, most hospitals are doing well enough to continue reinvesting in their facilities and equipment and their people, to keep modernizing, to stay ahead of patient expectations for the superior healthcare that they've come to expect. Unfortunately, there are also many hospitals that are struggling financially, mostly in the rural areas, where there's simply not enough patients with insurance coverage to offset the losses from the higher number of patients who are covered by the less than cost-paying Medicaid program. I'm concerned about what will happen when the federal government calls for repayment of the funds distributed at a time when hospitals needed it most to take care of COVID patients during the worst pandemic in 100 years. So, Yini, that's a quick overview of where we stand right now. Despite the sobering current view, I'm optimistic about the future. Hospital leadership and their dedicated staff have shown themselves to be a resilient bunch. Georgia has some of the finest teaching and research hospitals. We are widely known for excellent care for cancer, heart, stroke, just to name a few. Together, all of Georgia's hospitals will strive to develop new, better ways to deliver excellent care to patients. And the Shepherd Center is a shining example of that.
Thank
Earl,
you for
now
that.
that you totally depressed me.
That's so funny. I want to hit one bookmark before you go on, Sarah. I just want to hit a bookmark. I want to come back to that comment that you made about doing, conscious capitalism and the financial results will follow. I want to come back to that. And Sarah, please go ahead. I'm very interested to hear your reaction to Earl's overview.
Well, his overview was spot on. And that's why I said, thanks for depressing me so early in the morning. But the one thing I do want to say to Earl and his team at Georgia Hospital Association, they really led many of the hospitals through this and making sure that all hospitals were working together through this COVID pandemic, making sure we had personal protective equipment. I just want to give a shout out to Earl and his staff for all that he's done, because hospitals are, yes, there are still very, very challenging times. And what Earl talked about is, not going away anytime soon. So I just wanted to shout out to Earl.
Thank you. Thanks, sir.
Yeah, and they got some good stuff going on over at the Georgia Hospital Association. You all remember when we were doing our preparatory call that I observed that all the folks that I met when we first did our first interview, Earl, are still with you through it all. And Sarah, I would love for you to take us down a little bit. Our audience are CEOs of mid-sized businesses. What does it feel like to run and be a CEO in that environment? Earl gave us the statistics and what it looks like from the outside, but what does it feel like and what's going on behind the curtain, as somebody who's running one of these organizations?
Yeah. And, I'll pre-COVID, post-COVID, obviously you see these little circles under my eyes. It's a struggle.
For me, it's more like saddlebags, like just a little bit too much pandemic bacon going on there.
Yeah, I had one of my staff members said, "Hey, COVID has shrunk my clothes." It is challenging, but you just have to take one day at a time. And as I was preparing for this podcast, honestly, I was not aware of this concept of conscious capitalism. But as I read more and more, this is what hospitals do each and every day. From a higher purpose perspective, making sure patients are healthy, well, get back into their communities and stay healthy. This is what hospitals do. And we are challenged by COVID, workforce challenges, all the state, the state is still in flux. Earl, I don't know if you mentioned this, but 12 Georgia hospitals have closed since 2013. So it is a constant grind, but every day that I walk through the doors at Shepherd Center, there's still a lot of hope, there's hard work, and even humor. And that is what's getting us through, and it's one day at a time. It does get frustrating where you see hospital revenues continue to decline while insurance revenues continue to rise. It gets frustrating, but it's all about the patient and the family. Every decision that Shepherd Center makes and I make as a CEO, they are easy decisions when you really look at what is right for that patient, what is right for that family. Number one, that is our true north. Every decision that I've made over the last, I've been CEO now for almost 6 years, is looking at that patient and family as the true north. Second in our decision making comes, the Shepherd Center as a whole, and then third, that individual. So we're really focusing on what is right for that patient and family, and how can we work internally to motivate staff to keep them here long term. You mentioned Earl's tenure of his staff. Shepherd's very fortunate in our tenure of our staff as well. For example, I've been at Shepherd for 37 years. Our chief nursing officer has been here for 46 years. So we have a long tenure, which really helps. And then from our culture perspective, I think Shepherd's really known for its culture. We started in 1975 with 6 beds because of a family tragedy where Alana Shepherd's son, James Shepherd, injured himself and was paralyzed from the neck down and couldn't find any rehab facility in the Southeast. So they started this in 1975, and we've been very fortunate that we started as a family. And even though we're now over 1,800 employees, we still have that very much that family culture. So it's great to walk into each and every day, to be honest.
As we kind of drill down into the higher purpose, one of the background objectives of this series is to really show how to use the principles inside of a business and how the principles apply in real life. And one curiosity I have is the higher purpose of a hospital is very clear, unlike in some industries where you kind of like, they don't seem to have a higher purpose. They seem to have a lower purpose maybe, but not a higher purpose. The higher purpose of a hospital is pretty obvious. And I wonder if that makes it easy, if that makes it different, if you can use the higher purpose as a rallying point for folks, and if it helps pull people together, or if it just sits in the background and doesn't really. So I'm wondering how you use the fact that the higher purpose is so clear as a leader, and whether or not you see or observe any difference between, let's say, this industry and other industries versus the higher purpose, and how that might apply and play out in terms of leadership. I'd love for you both to take that question. So Sarah, you want to take that first?
From a higher purpose perspective, we really try to start all of our meetings, or large meetings like state of the center addresses that I do, or management meetings, or what have you. Every meeting is started with a mission moment. And what that mission moment does is really tells a story of somebody who went through Shepherd Center. So for example, we had a patient that came to us from Tennessee, very severe brain injury. And at the other hospital, the physicians were asking asking the family, it's probably time just to let him go. And they refused, and they brought him to Shepherd. And actually 1 year after his accident, he was running the Peachtree Road Race carrying an American flag. Now, I can't even run the Peachtree Road Race, let alone carry a huge American flag. But when you share those stories, and every single employee in our organization helped with that outcome, he's back to school, doing exceptionally well. They see the work that they do and why they're there, and what is our staff's higher purpose. So telling these stories and different stories really helps my staff really know what the higher purpose is, and really try to focus on what is right and how are we going to give this patient a quality of life back. And when you see that, it's very rewarding.
I appreciate everything that Sarah just said. At GHA, we talk often about how we don't work inside a hospital. We don't work at a hospital, but we work for those who do. We are a hospital association. We have 165 hospitals who are members. We hear their stories all the time. You mentioned earlier that it would impress you that we still have a good bit of the same staff that you met years ago that came in. And I think that's because each and every one of them are dedicated and committed to what they do. I've never seen a group as committed as the folks at GHA. The staff just continues to amaze me every day, and it's a real honor for me to work with them. But they take this stakeholder thing seriously. We never have used the words conscious capitalism, Soyini. That was new to me. when you called me recently. I looked it up and I really like that term. And frankly, I wish that other companies would embrace it. Don't you wish that government would embrace it?
That's my higher purpose, is I want every single CEO on the planet using and living these principles. That's the deal with me. Well, I'll start with Atlanta, but that's the deal. So thank you for saying that.
Welcome. I believe it.
If that, yeah.
And so as you think about the higher purpose and how the higher purpose was used by CEOs in hospitals over these past few years as they were kind of being battered, how did you see them actually using the higher purpose to pull people forward through COVID?
Well, I think everyone stepped up. The leadership at these hospitals stepped up. I remember early on when we were having such a tremendous supply shortage. You remember that? You couldn't get the personal, yeah, of course you did. The personal protective equipment. I remember the CEO down in Southwest Georgia, Scott Steiner, telling me that they were completely and totally out of masks that might cost what, Sarah, 35 cents, 20, 35 cents, something like that. That's what they did cost. And he was searching worldwide trying to find masks. He found them at $7 each. Now, this was back in 2020 when everyone was desperate. But his staff saw what he was doing and to just make it happen. Yes, it's going to cost exponentially more than we thought it was going to, but we're going to do what it takes to serve these patients. Get them well. And you remember Albany, Georgia was a hotbed of COVID there to begin with. But they tackled the problem. They all pulled together, and it was very impressive.
So let's turn back to the question, the idea that you raised, Earl, a few minutes ago around if you do the right thing, which we think is conscious capitalism, then the profits will follow. I would love it if you would unpack for us what that actually looks like in a hospital. Like, where do you actually see it showing up? Where do you see, if you were going to point to a P&L and say, this is where I can see the actual economic benefit of leading in this way, where would you point this out to the CEOs who might be listening to the podcast? And why isn't it already the case that companies all over the world are leading this way? Yeah, I would love for you to tackle that. And Sarah, then we'll pass it over to you.
Well, a lot of people don't realize that hospitals are competitive with each other. I mean, they're competitive entities. All you have to do is look around the Atlanta area, and you see the growth, and you see the expansion outside the perimeter, outside the metropolitan area, going on up into North and South Georgia, and they continue to deliver premium services, excellent services. They keep that in mind. They want to, again, their mission is to improve the health of the individual and the community. And so, as I mentioned about Chick-fil-A, if you do those things and you do them well, then people will choose to come to your facility rather than maybe one across town. So, that's where I kind of see that going. It's hard for me to express it on an individual hospital basis. I think that's something that Sarah may be able to do, but I can't talk about individual hospitals.
Yeah, Sarah, what are your thoughts?
A couple of things. One of the tenets is conscious leadership, which is really looking at long term. And I'm just going to use an example from a COVID perspective. When COVID happened, and we saw nurses or respiratory therapists who were traveling to New York because they got a bonus of, $20,000 for a 3-month contract or something. Everybody was struggling with that. We already had a workforce shortage, but now people were leaving for the money. And Shepherd's just a standalone, not-for-profit hospital. So we can't compete with some of these larger health systems who can pay nurse or respiratory therapists $100 an hour. We just can't. But when COVID hit, as a CEO, I stood up and told all the staff that even though you see layoffs and furloughs in the news and stuff, I said, you know what? I am making a commitment that throughout this COVID, which I thought was only going to be months at the time, right, Earl? We had no idea it's going to be lasting for 2 years. But I told them there will be no furloughs, there will be no layoffs. We did close some of our outpatient clinics, and so we did have, quote, extra staff for a while. But I was really committed, one, to our staff that who come in each and every day and give 100% for our patients and families. The second thing is this really helps our patients in the long term. And again, I'm talking long term because we do have staff with high tenure. I think our average tenure of our line staff is 8 years, which is pretty long for a hospital. And if I furloughed or laid off or didn't give raises, or if I changed benefits, people would probably leave. And for a specialty such as Shepherd Center, it can take months before somebody is really, or years, proficient in treating the types of unique patients we see, these very catastrophic brain injury and spinal cord injuries. So, with that, I think that really just sent a message from a leadership perspective that you care. I care about you, I care about the patients and the families, and together we're going to move this forward. If we were to look at what are the measures of success, I think was your original question. We can look at things like turnover. We can look at things like, well, we already look at costs, so that's a no-brainer. But as you know, costs are really rising with everything going on. But looking at what are the hospital-specific outcomes, and for us, our discharge to community, our patient satisfaction scores, our 30-day rehospitalization rates are still incredible. So to me, that shows that everybody is working together towards one common goal, one common mission for our patients and families. And that's really all about I could think about on that one.
That's great. I mean, those are all wonderful. Like that's enough to certainly differentiate performance. And you know what, Sarah and Earl, I would love to keep you here all day. Like I could literally talk to you about this all day. But unfortunately, it really does look like our time is up.
No way. What?
It is. And so I very much thank you for your time and the perspectives and really pulling the conversation towards you. I'm really grateful for that. And I hopefully, we'll continue the conversation.
Yeah, and thank you to you for bringing this concept forward to, it seems like it was a new concept for both Earl and I, but I think hospitals a lot of times intuitively do a lot of these things, but having that top of mind is great. So thank you for educating me.
Yeah, hospitals have been doing it. We just didn't know it had a fancy name.
Yeah, I get it. Like it's new, but not new. I get it.
Right.
Hey, thanks for listening. I know your time is really valuable. So what did you learn? I heard both Sarah and Earl give some specific suggestions for how applying conscious capitalism could lead to more profitable and sustainable financial outcomes. Did you catch those suggestions? Well, here's what I heard. First, I heard them cite better customer, and in this case, they're talking about hospital patients, but better customer satisfaction. Second, I heard them talk about lower employee turnover, which is a huge cost savings. Listen, if lower turnover is the only thing that happens because you apply conscious capitalism in your business, that alone is going to be worthwhile. And then third, I heard Sarah specifically cite better industry metrics, and she talked specifically about readmission rates. If these kind of outcomes would help you in your business, then I would encourage you to give some thought to how you can take the suggestions and turn them into specific actions that you can take in your business and drive conscious capitalism down inside your organization. Oh, and by the way, if you want some help, there are a whole bunch of other business leaders, CEOs, presidents, etc., trying to do this too. That's the point of the whole show. So take a look at the Conscious Capitalism website, subscribe to our newsletter, and come join us hopefully at an event. I want every CEO, business owner, and business leader running their business this way. So please rate and review this episode on iTunes or wherever you're listening. Send it to a friend or a colleague. Reach out to me on LinkedIn and give me feedback. I'm really easy to find. And that wraps up our time together on Capitalism Done Right, brought to you by CEO Exclusive and Conscious Capitalism Atlanta. Until next time, go out and do some good in your business.